the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand and baseball in the summer. Someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer. Baseball in the summer.
Welcome to the BrockvMac Legendary Rivals podcast, and I am pretty happy because this is like home cooking. We are talking to another Brock pitcher, Brad Tupper. It's been a long time, Brad, and super excited to catch up with you because I legitimately haven't talked to you since the last day of maybe that last meeting we had many, many moons ago, where the coaches informed us that we had to play the spring if we wanted to continue. And
right.
The American dream of playing at Brock. And then I stood up and said, no, this is the Canadian dream. I was all agitated. But Brad, it's been a long time. What have you been up to? And where are you today?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up as a Burlington boy, and I'm actually still in Burlington. Right after university, I was basically stuck around town for a bit. Then I actually moved to Hamilton for a little while. For the most part, I've been basically a pretty local guy. When I first came out of university, got up, with a BBA, so looking to stay in the business world. And so I would say, like everyone else, I think when I first got out, I was trying to find myself and tried a few different things, and just tried to, the first couple of years or first year was just trying to pay the bills and figuring out what to do. And then I would say probably within a few years, my so-called, I guess, work destiny kind of came into play, in which I started to work at the bank level, institutional level, and working downtown. So even though I basically started to be a commuter, and basically for the last at least 25 of the 30 years since Brock, I've been essentially commuting to downtown Toronto, and I've worked for the 3 different big banks and working on the institutional side, and specifically been in the what's called the prime brokerage business, and working in relation management and the hedge fund business, and then and also with that, I have a family now in Burlington. I've been married for 14 years, and I have a almost 13-year-old daughter. So just one child.
Oh, it's good that you got it right, or you'd be sleeping on the couch. And
No, exactly. I still might not have it right, but I was also saying, but
well, it's a long time to commute, Brad, and that's that's great, and you probably have some really interesting insight into the financial meltdown that we had in 2009, 10, thereabouts. Yeah, so like we'll get there. Before we do, let's Burlington is clearly an epicenter. We have 6 or 7 players with Burlington ties, and were you familiar with any of the guys that we played with in '95? As a result of Burlington as opposed to Brock. So people like Nate Kapusa and Brian Simmons, Rob Green. Had you met them before Brock?
Yeah, a few of them. I knew everyone because Marcus Hoyne, he's a year younger than I am, but Brian Simmons and Nate were my age. Rob Green's a little bit older, but I grew up playing with Rob Green's brother Dave. So I knew Rob before Brock. It didn't see him for quite a long time before Brock, but I knew him obviously through his brother, who was same age as I was, and then Marcus Soyan and Nate actually played on this the same team for the Burlington rep that I played on. I was essentially more of I grew up playing house league mainly, and then started as you get older to start playing different things, and then I started playing little rep when I was probably just a couple years prior to Brock, and so within those few years that I was playing rep, I knew I played with Mark as well as Nate, and I played a little bit with Brian in high school baseball, and all in high school baseball. A lot of them played on the same team back in the day. There was the high school was Nelson High School, and was a juggernaut in baseball back then, and those guys were all on it. So they were quite good because of those guys as well. So yeah, I knew a few of them quite well, not as in good friends necessarily in that nature, but also from acquaintances and playing baseball for a few years with them.
So Brad, so you grew up in Burlington, obviously, and do you remember what attracted you to sports, or what, is it something that started early in your life, or tell me about a little bit about discovering baseball and sports and growing up in Burlington?
Yeah, for me, there's no doubt the big part of that was I think everyone else, it was my dad. He was a pretty big sports fan, in the fact that he mainly was hockey, baseball guy, but he introduced me just to sports, and I got hooked pretty early. I can recollect as in playing t-ball and loving t-ball at 4 years old, and playing the junior t-ball, and then from there just falling in love with it. Then it's one of those things. I don't have a great memory for all things, but I truly remember with baseball was just to this day I still remember just the difference of me from playing junior t-ball to playing my first year of back then it was tyke, and it was actual pitching, and was those 2 years was a huge change for me. I went from stopping the ball with my foot and not able to catch a ball to within 2 years, playing on the select team and doing all that kind of stuff. So for me, it was just one of those things of, my dad introduced me to a couple sports, being young, just like everyone else, and then just taking it from there. And honestly, from my standpoint, I don't remember part of my life that I wasn't a sports fan. Really, so I've been pretty big sports between baseball, football, basketball, and hockey probably for for almost my entire life, that memory standpoint anyway. So
it's amazing. Super, and I think Burlington, obviously has high school baseball and lots of organized sports. Do you remember any coaches that would have had an early influence on you? And obviously you making that big jump from house league, I assume that initially you probably were self-taught, and then probably had some more advanced coaching when you got to the rep program. How did that work?
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's kind of funny about that, because I would say I was, like everyone else, my dad was my coach from a young age, and then when I got a little bit older, started playing what they called the All-Star Select, and then into rep. I would say I probably what we would call the real coaching. I don't think I had my first real aha coaching moment, which is kind of unfortunate. Even though I learned a lot, but a lot of stuff I think was self-learn and just figure things out. Even to this day, when I started pitching, it was just me basically asking my dad, I've been working on a curveball, and I think I can throw strikes. Do you mind if I pitch, kind of thing, right? And I started probably when I was a peewee, and was pitching ever since then. But I always remember the one year. This is the one year I did play with Nate. Was midget back in the day when it was called midget. Was John Turbot. He was back then all he had was major and minor, but he was the major coach at that point. And one thing I always remember is going to their tryouts and just seeing the quality of just how they ran a practice that I've never was really introduced to that much, even in playing select. And during that first meeting, he handed out basically a stapled pamphlet of, I don't know, I would say it's probably about 10 to 20 pages of how to recognize pitches. So, literally the spin of the ball, if it's a dot, it's going to be, a slider. And if it does this, if you see the seams do this. And I just, for sure from a hitting standpoint and a pitching standpoint, that was my first year of absolutely getting the introduction to true coaching, to the fact of more than just basics, but actually getting deep down into, I guess nowadays it's kind of like analytics to a certain extent, but just that, and just even for me, that was the first time I was really even taught, someone looking at me and actually teaching me pitching mechanics, and seeing what I was doing wrong and actually commenting on, lower body and arm angle and arm placement and et cetera, and just rather than just back what I was knowing before was just throwing the ball essentially, I guess, but with being able to throw a couple curveballs and a fastball back then, but I mean, that's about it. But yeah, I would say for sure that was a biggest adjustment for me, because even though I was at that time 16 and quite a few years of playing baseball, that was for sure the first introduction to I would say that first step of the difference of a real true coach and getting you prepared for games and practices and et cetera.
Were you always a pitcher, Brad, or did you do both?
I did both. I was like, once again, I didn't play huge quality baseball until I got later on. And so when I did start playing similar to Brock to some higher levels, when I started playing rep, I did become more of a, as they call it nowadays, a PO, pitcher only. But otherwise, even to this day, like when I'm just playing beer league, it's all say I've always tried to play other positions. I was mainly an infielder until I became a pitcher, and then my hitting didn't go as well as my pitching did when I got later in life, and I became more of a PO at that point. So
I'd be happy to wear a big T-shirt with PO on it, but
yeah.
but people might mistake that as being pissed off. So Brad, did you also play high school ball, and as you're getting through high school, what factored into where you were going to go off to university? Like, do you remember the 3 schools that you selected, and why?
Yeah, you know what, my story is it was kind of funny. I was, back in our day, we had the OAC, so it was our, my so-called 5th year, which was actually required back then. It wasn't because I was staying back, but I was actually thinking about, I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was actually, I'm going to come back for grade 14 and just get some better marks, because my marks were okay, but I think it was, high 70s, so I wasn't thinking it was anything crazy. It was not going to get into the to every school I'd want to, probably, and so I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I thought that's what I was going to, I was not going to even actually apply. And there's one thing I always remember is I had a counselor named Mr. Bromley, and he said to me, "Hey Brad, it's only $100 to apply." I think it was $100. I might be wrong with that amount, but I think it was $100. Just ask your parents for $100. Pick 3 universities. Take your time. Make sure you pick which ones you want, that you think you'd like to go to, and give it a try. And the worst thing that could happen is you could just say no and do what you want to do after the fact. But don't decide not to apply and then regret it, right? And so I applied to University of Ottawa, Ryerson, and Brock. And I got into Brock. And the funny thing I always remember is Ryerson was my guarantee, because at that time it was supposed to be really low average to get in. So I said, well, I'll apply there just so I at least have a guarantee. And it was the one of the 3 that I didn't get into. And and University of Ottawa was obviously one as well. But I ended up that, for me, Ottawa was never really, because it's going to be too far. So Brock became an easy choice from that standpoint. Plus, I got into the program that I wanted to, which was the business administration program, and so it was a pretty easy choice for me. And I always say to people, it's only, St. Catharines is only 45 minutes away from me, but it was far enough that I could stay away from home. So I enjoyed that part of it as well. And so that's what I did. Yeah, absolutely. So
seems like a common refrain from the Burlington guys, are like, it's just far enough away that I'm away from home, but my parents have to undertake a bit of a journey to get there. So
yeah, for sure. That was helpful, because I knew for sure one thing I didn't want to do, whatever I went to, like I wouldn't have gone to McMaster or whatever by my place, even though I probably could have got in anyways. But I didn't want to live at home. I wanted to go out and about somewhere for sure. So
That's perfect. So did you get into your first year? Obviously, is probably 1994, I would think. Or
you got it exactly.
yeah. Were you in residence first year?
I was the old school Queenston residence,
Oh
which was the
no.
General Hospital, St. Catherine's General Hospital, the old nurses residence back in the day. So
Yeah,
yeah.
we give that residence a bit of a failing grade. What was your experience like at the Queenston Res?
Well, it was mixed, but I would say the ironic part of it, even what we're doing right now with the Legends game we're doing 30 years, is that in that couple of weeks, actually, I lived on the fourth floor and we were Doherty. We're actually 15 of us from that floor are getting together in a couple of weeks just for drinks and dinner. So for me, I still have a lot of close friends from that. So from residence itself, being off campus was probably not the best situation. I mean, when you got Queenston, you obviously were considered residents and they gave you a bus pass. So you're able to, take the city bus and do it. So that commute was not prime, I guess. The fact you'd rather just roll out of bed and walk. And so there's no doubt I probably skipped a lot more than I probably would have otherwise, knowing that I had to hop on a bus and go there probably. But the residence itself was, I think it only lasted a couple years after we were done, and it wasn't, it was clearly not a new building, but from some friendships in the room and setup and how that was like it, it was huge memories for me, and it was a great experience from that standpoint. And we had the cafeteria was at actually the hospital as our food plan, and back then, when I was 94, was the first year. That was the first year or second year of the village. So that was obviously wasn't the residents, and back then the residents' food was only DQ, and it was not considered anything great. So we always thought that we weren't that much further behind, if not maybe a little bit better, having the hospital cafeteria, because they did have a little more selection than what actually on campus at that time was. But yeah, I mean, as I said, it wasn't. Didn't necessarily enjoy having to bus it all the time, but I would say the time I had at Queenston for the 1 year was. Was awesome. I mean, it was one of those things of, we also had the advantage of being walking distance to downtown and being close to other things that way. So, if you took advantage of it, it was pretty cool. So,
Did you do what everybody else in the Queenston Res did and end up with a pair of hospital pants, the green hospital pants?
Yeah, well,
I remember.
I would say it was more of the. I would say, yeah, there was quite a few people. Our floor did not. We didn't do that, but I would say, yeah, it was common that a lot of times people who would do a memory keepsake and they would, order T-shirts or pants or everyone is saying. A lot of them got hospital pants with whatever the name of the floor was on their butt, obviously, and that kind of stuff. But we never did that ourselves. But no, I never owned a Queenston hospital pants.
Well, there you go. I think I remember Simmons wearing his to practice, so that's pretty much how I can remember.
Actually, that's one thing I forgot to mention. Simmons was I lived next door to him at Queenston. He was my neighbor. And
oh my goodness.
So he actually was there for a short time. He ended up getting to be really good friends with a couple guys on was it the 5th or 6th floor, and so they ended up someone on the 6th floor moved out. I think it's 5th actually. Anyway, the other floor, and he a couple months into the year he ended up moving to that floor, and then I got a new neighbor, probably within first couple months of school. So
yeah, that's an interesting small world. Did you did you partake in the milk crate theft, or did you have milk crates to prop up your bed?
Well, then I forgot that one thing I mentioned too is that because of first week, that I don't know if he even knew it, Simmons, we gave him the nickname of Skull because he was dipping in his room. So I don't know if he even knew that actually, but anyways.
No, it's he did love his lippers. I will say that, especially when we get into baseball. But so Brad, how did you find your courses in first year? Like I was in the same program, so I know the one class that we can discuss, which is stats.
Yes.
Probably the bane of everyone's existence at Brock was stats.
Yeah. I mean, but I think first year was like everyone else. even to this day, it's a feeling out period, right? So there's a lot of, you figuring stuff out, like like for some on your own, then you have all this, your own time and what do you do and how to set up your classes. Like do you remember the first, I think that was the first or second year when I was in university, was the introduction of BERT. Remember BERT, the call-in system you had to do for set up your courses and all that stuff. And one thing I always remember was, I thought it was going to be a go-getter, and I always remember this because I changed it the way I did, is that knowing that I was going to have to commute from Queenston, I was going to have that commute, I purposely set up my courses to have an hour in between courses at a certain day, because I would go and study in between, then go to the class, come back and study, whatever. And then within a couple of weeks, I stopped doing that and just hopped on the bus and went back to the residence. And so I learned from that standpoint, be more efficient. Obviously, how you want to do it is, and get it done. Maybe do some back-to-back classes in the morning, and then you're done for the day, and you can do your homework afterwards. But I learned pretty fast, I think, that my first inkling of how I probably should set up my courses and study habits were not the best, for sure. So, I thought the courses were pretty good. I mean, I think the one thing was, I just mentioned that OAC, is that I thought, at least from the business standpoint of the courses I took, that the one thing OEC really did was it prepared you for first year university. I thought, so from my standpoint, I was, for a few courses, I thought I was quite well prepared, at least course material wise. And so from that standpoint, like like everyone else, I was an exceptional student or anything like that, don't get me wrong, but I just felt that, stats was a big one. Calculus was a tough course. I'm just trying to think.
Microeconomics. I did, like, we had the split, right? Micro and macroeconomics. And
I didn't mind economics was one of my, I ended up liking economics. I ended up taking economics later as electives. It was one of the ones I was actually okay at, but there's one of them but stats for sure, but calculus was for sure a really tough one. And I remember one thing was my first year was not even business. Do you remember what you took for your electives for like arts and science? Do you remember what you took?
Yeah, I do.
I took film, and I took film for my arts, and I really enjoyed it. But I always remember the one reason why I took business was I didn't want to write anything. Like, I didn't want to write essays, didn't want to do anything. And so with film, or any course you took probably in the arts at that time, you're going to have to do some type of paper, right? So I remember the first paper I wrote for my first semester of film was getting like a lot of red back and just saying, Brad, nice content, but your grammar and blah, 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 everything else is, you have a lot to work to do. So I always remember that it was, it made my decision going to business made me feel a lot better. That's for sure. So.
Do you remember everyone used to get together and kind of discuss what bird course could you fly into that elective?
Absolutely. Rocks for jocks, right? Whatever for that kind of thing for science.
Astronomy was one, or astronomy or astrology.
Yeah, I was one that was. Few friends who took that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember everyone saying, like the lab consists of you going out to a field and you drink wine and you're in a tent, and I'm like, I couldn't really do that, so I took classical lit as an elective.
Oh wow!
And
good for you.
Yeah, I regret it to this day.
Well,
stats.
Stats
I was bailed out by Stats I was bailed out by the fact that I had an old high school friend of mine that was at Brock and had been a couple years ahead of us. So he sold me a doctored. Remember, you could bring in the textbook into the exam,
right?
And he managed, along with some other nefarious means, which I won't mention because maybe. I get dragged under a microscope, but managed to get a hold of one that had the answers. So I made sure not to get perfect on the stats exam, but I don't think I would have made it through stats if I hadn't have had that little life hack to get around the stats. Yeah. Let's put it that way, because it was really difficult, and the hardest part was I had a prof that it was really hard to understand. Like, I couldn't understand what the hell he was saying half the time. Yes. So it was really tough.
No, I think we all had that. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt that for me it was the toughness and then putting the time in and then is, it's always that battle of going to class, not going to class, and all that kind of stuff. Right? So it was one of those
So
things
that,
that's a huge adjustment, right? So
yeah, and it kind of brings us to the sign-ups in the hall for the baseball club.
yeah,
So
I
it
remember
was
that.
baseball club, and we had these banners and
Yeah.
neon things all over the school. Do you remember why you decided to stop and what you thought it was initially?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I remember you actually, it was the first time I was there. I don't remember if you were there, but I know Ted for sure was there at the table, with a couple signs there. For me, it was obviously just straight up baseball and, club baseball, and just that itself was enough for me to at least start a discussion and getting interested of what you guys were thinking of doing and all that. And so for me, it was just even like I said, even though I didn't necessarily, like I said, come from playing a big background of playing high quality baseball. I guess technically, I still was the fact that I felt that it was, just for the love of the game. I wanted to find out more and at the same time is, just see what's all about and participate and just go from there. And so for me, that was just the big part was just, hey, I think that's a great idea. Let's see what's all about and see where it takes us, right? So
Yeah, and that leads to those indoor workouts, which
mm-hmm.
um, you're one of the survivors of the indoor workout group, which mostly provided our pitching staff and a few um, high performers on the team.
Yeah,
But do you
I
remember?
to this day, I still remember Chris Eva. I still remember him in those workouts. He was clearly a little head and shoulders above quite a few people, right? So I always remember that.
Yeah, Chris is a big imposing guy, and
Yeah,
um, I
through
think
heart, right?
initially it was just tons of people in the gym throwing,
Yes. Mm.
and then we pitchers had to get isolated up into the
Yeah,
ballet studio,
remember that.
and
That's right. Yeah.
so it was interesting from that perspective. And the worst part of the whole ballet studio thing was we had a couple catchers and we would throw real baseballs up there as opposed to the rubber ones they were throwing downstairs. And the first two guys that lined up, those were the guys who threw it right through the wall. And so that it didn't really set a really good tone. We might
No.
have been further ahead, I think, if we would have taken Rob Green and maybe myself or Ted, and we would have thrown first to show
Right.
that the point was actually to hit the catcher in the glove. Um, but what do you recall of the indoor workouts? And Tim Topping came in there somewhere, I think somewhere in the midpoint of
Right.
that, and brought plates and stuff. But most of us remember all the running and the stairs and the exercise we had to do. But what do you remember of the indoor workouts?
Yeah, I would say like all the above. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I probably don't remember as well. There's a lot of stuff I forgot, but I mean, I would say totally remember it was a big group, and as you know, it's similar to like even how you when you kind of have basically somewhat of an open tryout situation, you have different you have doesn't even quite baseball quality, but you just have your from a personality. We had a diverse group of people who came out and played, and totally remember the running. I remember coming back to residence and just being quite worn out after it. And then obviously when the coaching started too, and that, like I said, is that and actually start doing more drills, specific drills, and rather than just show me what you got kind of stuff, it was, I always remember that just because just getting even drilling down mechanically and doing drills. I remember with Topping doing that, and even to this day, I still some of the drills he did. Like I coached for a few years back, just as a non-parent, just had a friend who was coaching his son, so I just helped out a little bit. And the drill of me as using the towel and slapping someone's reaching out and striding and then slapping the hand of a guy who's kneeling, who's whoever was like 5 feet away, just to practice your stride and push off and all that kind of stuff. And I always remember those pieces. And I always remember also when Coach McRae was introduced to the team eventually as well, before we had the outdoor tryouts. And to this day, during those tryouts or open practice at that time was him introducing the pitchers who didn't know how to throw a changeup, the changeup grip. And I really didn't work on it or know much about it. And from those workouts and Coach McRae's introduction to it, that was how I got introduced to throwing a changeup. So, and I used it obviously at Brock, and then I've obviously used changeup's been an important pitch for me even in my beer leagues too. So
I'm glad one of us got the point. I still can't throw one. It's interesting, and that brings us to the summer. We know now that we're going to have a team, and we don't know quite that we're headed to an even crazier training camp. Do you remember how you prepared for the first season that summer? Did you play? A little bit? And I don't think any of us had an inclination as to what was coming, right?
I honestly had no idea. So from that standpoint, I don't think I really prepared more than just, played in, the men's league that I played in. Usually for, the one league we played in, and I played in Burlington was, 19 and above kind of league. So it was, or 18 above, whatever it was. So I just played that. So I played baseball all summer, and that league was pretty good quality, not as good as quality as, maybe, some of the rep teams, but yeah, I honestly for sure did not know what we're getting into, because at that point, a lot of the recruiting was getting done, and a lot of the guys who weren't necessarily there during those other workouts that we were just talking about, between, the Houstons and, Hoover and all these guys coming, like in even pitching wise with, seeing some other guys come in, like, I had no idea what the competition was going to be like, and what the tryout was going to entail. So, I guess I prepared somewhat mentally, knowing that I was going to go into a situation of probably some really good ball players, and I was going to have to work hard and at the same time is go there, have fun, because there's a situation, because even this, when we start discussing more, the one thing that I was going to come out of this was that, I didn't even think I was going to make the team, honestly, to the point to, I know I was on the team as the so-called, 10th pitcher, if you want to say, but at the same time, it was one of those things of, I just wanted that mentality of always just going there, have fun, and throw strikes and see what happens, right? So that's basically what it came down to it, and I do remember a few points of that, of when we did have those, that whatever it was, late August, when we had those tryouts, and specifically in Thorold Park, and I remember having the seeing the quality of the players that we recruited, and seeing how many real good ball players, like right off the bat, you just can tell. Like as soon as we got there, it was just like when we're just playing catch before we do it, and the coaches were talking, and just seeing some of the drills right off the bat, you're just like, wow, okay, yeah. We picked up some really good quality ball players. So.
Yeah, the training camp was interesting. I will say this: there wasn't a ton of pitchers there, so
nope. That helped me. Part of that, yeah, but no, absolutely. I would say that we were a little thin there for sure. So
I remember us cutting 3 of them, and that's all I remember, because I remember their names more than anything. And,
right.
But another true fact is that of the 10-man pitching staff, 8 of them were from the winter workouts.
Yeah. One more, and Todd started off as a catcher, right? So there you go. So
yeah. I take that back. It's 7, because I always tend to forget Ron, but Ron Rao, Joel Garten, and Steve Vatour, who was also a position player, were the only additions to the pitching staff. The rest were all people who had previously already been to Brock.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And there was a maturity level too with the pitching. Everyone was second or third year, for the most part, except for the new guys, and some, Rob Green, 4th year. That's
right.
Also a lot in terms of leadership and in terms of maturity, which was interesting. Do you remember whether you were on the winning or losing team for having to do that ridiculous duck walk punishment? Were you on the winning team or the losing one? Do you remember?
You know what? I think I must. I don't remember, but at the same time, I think that I must be on the winning team, because I don't remember doing that. So I think if it was something I did, I probably would have totally remembered that. But I don't remember because I was just thinking because after you said that, I'm recalling, but I honestly don't remember if I was on the winning side or not. But I think I must have been. Otherwise, I would have been embedded in my head, I would think. But I don't. I
Yeah,
do not remember.
I don't think you forget it if you had to do it. It was
Yeah.
just, I mean, no normal duck walk thing was maybe to the second base bag and back,
Yeah.
and where we had to do it all the way around the field. So
Yeah. I remember that now. Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure I didn't have to do that. Yeah.
yeah, Nate, I think that ended up injuring Nate, right? So interesting
That's
from
right.
that perspective. Was it? So tell me about throwing to someone that you know, right? So you've got a catcher there and Nate, and then the other one's Matt Fletcher, and we had Matt King,
Yeah.
really the three. But Nate's someone you know. Does that make you feel better as a pitcher having someone that you kind of are familiar with, or tell me about your relationship with catchers in particular, because it's interesting from I don't think a lot of players have an understanding of what it's like as a pitcher needing what you need out of a catcher. You really
I
have to
mean,
be in sync.
absolutely. And I would say I'm a pretty easy pitcher to the point of, even to this day, like I said, still just playing the beer league stuff, is that, I very rarely shake off, a catcher. So I'm huge on the trust part of it. And so if it gets to a point of, if I'm, even to this day, but back then, if I was shaking, then that means I was totally had no trust in the catcher, which I find that's a huge part of that. I think that's the biggest piece. And from my standpoint, I don't. I also know Matt King was the third, I guess, catcher there for us a bit there. But I remember one thing I do recall, because I did pitch before to Nate previously, obviously in our Burlington days. But I remember having quite a bit of bullpen sessions with Matt Fletcher, and I remember with him, I felt I got a pretty quick relationship with him to the point of trusting him and understanding. And Matt was also, he wasn't necessarily he was the loudest guy in that nature, but he was a very positive guy. And so from that standpoint, I remember just a big part of, I had some success on the tryouts with when I was put in there for, different drills or different games, and I would choose the catcher. And I felt that a lot part of it was him giving me the confidence to pitch what I needed to pitch. And, I threw hard enough to get guys out, and my curveball and changeup, if placed properly, if he did things right, he can get guys out, right? So I remember having those discussions right off the bat with him. That was very helpful.
That's great. It's we all have our own style of catcher that we like working with, and you got to find that resonance, and also understanding how to set up and where your pitches are most effective. It's really unique.
That was the big thing for me, is having that understanding of that, because knowing that I wasn't going to blow guys away and stuff like that. They knew by catching me that, they're not just going to sit in the middle of the plate and just catch the ball. They had to work with me to, figure out, inside, outside, high, low, and all that kind of stuff. And so with that, I felt with at least the catchers we had we had that good communication of knowing that that's what we needed to do. And I tried my best to do it. Also, it was easier said than done. Obviously, looking at my ERA for that year, but at the same time, for the most part, I felt we had at least good communication, anyways, for sure.
Yeah. No, Brad. I mean, did you feel like it was heads or tails to make the team, or at what point did you feel pretty confident that they were going to keep you on the team? And maybe it was the moment you got your jersey. I don't know.
Yeah, I was for sure down to the final cut, kind of from a confidence standpoint. There's no doubt until I saw my name, if you want to say, on the piece of paper to a certain extent, or the jersey, as you said. But I must say that, because there's a few times that I remember we were at Thorold for one, and then we actually were at the downtown field for one of the tryouts as well. And I remember that, the one time I think it was I had success. I was able to face 3 batters or something like that the first time, and got a hit, but I didn't get hit hard. nothing too crazy. And then I remember always, I actually struck Hoover out. I'm pretty sure, I think it's Hoover, but one of the good batters, I think pretty sure it was Hoover on the so-called pitch that I learned on a changeup on the second tryout, and just I felt really confident that I actually showed that I could get guys out. I didn't know if that would mean that they had confidence in me because I didn't have any relationships with the coaches with that much at the time to put me on the team, but I for sure didn't have any confidence that I was going to truly make the team, but I felt that I did leave it on the field that with the minimal amount of time that I was out there and actually pitched, I felt that I threw strikes, got some key outs, and then, like I said, I got hit hard a couple times, but all in all, I actually felt that I showed that I could, if I'm pitching the plate, probably in my spots, I can get outs and keep the ball in the park, right? So
amazing. So, do you remember? So you make the team, and so everyone's pretty amped that they make the team.
Yeah.
And we do this kind of grueling training camp. So that means pretty quickly you're going to get pushed into the deep end with Coach Tim Topping. And I always talk about Tim feeling he was very a calming influence. He kind of made you smile, even if you didn't want to smile. Tell me a little bit about, and very technical coach. He was very into mechanics and that kind of stuff. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Coach Tim Topping.
Yeah, I think that I thought Tim and I got along really well. Because I think at the end of the day, it's obviously what you've said too, is he's just a genuine man, and a very nice man, and at the same time he was very technical, and so I felt that I learned quite a bit from him just by, once again, just saying before, like just putting us through the drills, looking at what you're doing, and actually giving you specific suggestions about you, rather than just, okay, here's the drills, everyone do this, rather when you actually got personal and down to level and specific of what to work on. It was very helpful to me. Just like I said, I didn't get a lot of it overall in my so-called baseball career. So from that standpoint, I felt that he was very, very open in the fact that he was, kind of that so-called open door policy, if you want to say. And so, I can't say I necessarily talked his ear off and asked a lot of questions, but we did talk quite a bit just for different questions and situations. And, I thought he was for sure a big part in our success that year, to the fact of just, I think, like you already mentioned, that outside of his just baseball knowledge, but it was that common influence, I think, was, like you said, I thought it helped the pitching staff out a lot, I thought. So
yeah, it wasn't easy pitching for Coach McRae, who had very high standards and who would let you hear it, like from that perspective,
Absolutely, yes. I think we all got the brunt of it at least a few times, right? So
yeah, some of us 2 pitches into a game. But tell me a little bit about your impressions of Coach Mike McRae and him as a head coach, because we were pretty. I would say he let Tim run his own show from that perspective. But as we've said, Mike was a pitcher who had very high standards for the pitching staff and was not shy about, instilling a disciplined culture, giving it to you if you're letting the team down, any of those kinds of things. Tell me a little bit about what you thought about Coach McRae.
Yeah, I would say the general summary that you just had, I think, is truly how I felt about him as well. Obviously, I think right off the bat, he had that persona, like I said, when he first got introduced, just even before the spring tryouts and stuff like that, of just being, summer tryouts, like the year before that, he obviously was a baseball guy. He was, you could tell right off the bat, like you said, he was going to be disciplined. He was, he was not going to take any crap at the same time, but in a good way. But at the same time, he breathed baseball. You could tell that he knew what he was doing, and when he spoke, you could totally see that he understood what his goal was and how to get there to a certain extent. Like, but there's no doubt it was, for me, I was intimidated by him, no doubt about it, just because of my not having a lot of experience in the baseball world with a lot of high-end disciplined coaches. That it was something for me to experience and understand that side of things. I mean, I had nothing but respect for him, but there's no doubt that I purposely tried not to get on his bad side at the same time. So for the right reason, but yeah, no, for me, I always remember too, and I deserved it. It was I don't forget, it was Genesee. We played him actually at Stomper Stadium, whatever it was called at the time. That I started the game versus one of the junior colleges exhibition games, and they were, I got hit pretty good, and my control was a little bit off, and a few times I looked back at the bullpen, looking to see if there's someone in the bullpen. I don't even recall if I was truly trying to make it as the sake of, okay, please get someone going because I suck kind of thing. But at the same time, he noticed that. And so I forget I lasted I don't know if I even lasted out of the first inning or if it was the second inning I got pulled. And he walked me right into the dugout, into the locker room, and gave me shit. Sorry, excuse the language. He gave me face to face. Wasn't necessarily a full yell, but it was basically very stern, aggressive. Don't ever do that again, and laid it out for me of, you pitch until I tell you that you're not going to pitch. Don't look over there. Don't tell me when you should get out. You should want to go be in there, and you work your damn hardest until we say it's done. You know what I mean, kind of thing. So I got I wasn't further into the season, so it wasn't at the beginning, but I for sure felt the wrath a little bit, no doubt about it, and I deserved it. But at the same time, from that standpoint, I made sure I changed my ways and never did that again. So
it's not easy. Like I think like this is a guy you don't want to disappoint, and then when he lays it in on you, like that can't be an easy thing because all of us are wired in a way we don't want to disappoint our teammates or our coaches. Or that's the burden that comes with pitching, Brad, is that it's the one position that so much responsibility is on your shoulders. And I think all of us have times where it's just like, get me the hell out of here. I can't figure out anything today. But mentally,
no, and I get it. There's no doubt that was even to this day, is that I can understand you're saying about, with Chris Peters and what he said and stuff, that when you have that discipline and you kind of have that my way or the highway type personality, no matter what you're in, doesn't matter if you're a baseball coach or you're managing people and what you're doing or what I'm doing, some people take it and some people don't, right? Some people absorb it or can work with it, and then other ones you can butt heads with. So I'm not a confrontational guy. So from my standpoint, it's I have a huge respect for him because I learned a lot from him. At the same time, I learned a lot from my experience at Brock. So for me, from that standpoint, I honestly didn't know any better from the standpoint of what my expectation of what the manager of that team should be. You know what I mean? So, but at the same time, there's no doubt that I at times after that I wouldn't say I was necessarily scared of him, but I didn't want to do anything that would have get him angry at me again. That's for sure.
Yeah, but it's a lesson learned, right? And not,
I said, it wasn't, and I deserved it. It was one of those things of, he did it not in public. He took me to the locker room, and it was a one-on-one. And maybe some people by the entrance maybe could have heard him yelling a little bit, but at the same time, he did. From my standpoint, he did it the right way and not embarrassing me or in that nature. It was just a so-called stern talking to, and I learned from it. So from that standpoint, you can't really expect much more from that. So.
No, it's totally. I think it's amazing to actually hear that and to not have taken it, in the way that's exactly what it was intended to do, is likely to have you bounce back and mentally adjust.
I didn't necessarily feel that day. I must say I did go home quite. I won't go as far as angry, but I just kind of questioned everything, and nothing but quitting or that age, but just okay, I really take a step back and really understand what happened, and that's so I think after I was kind of angry at first when it first happened, and then when I stood back and thought about it, I understood it and respected it after that and moved on. So.
Amazing. Brad, do you have any other memories of the first year, like just in terms of maybe some of the trips down south, or we'll keep nationals out of it, but anything up until that point, does anything stand out from this, from the season for you?
Um, yeah, I mean, I would say that for sure. I remember doing the U.S. trips. Like the one thing I always remember is St. Bonaventure. I remember sitting there and then just kind of getting a feel of a U.S. college. Obviously it's a Division I school, but not necessarily considered to be a top baseball school. But at the same time, they had a baseball field with dugouts, on school campus, and we played against their basically JV team, and they still were really good compared to what we were used to at the time. Like we were very competitive with them, and from that standpoint. But then we found out they actually didn't play any of their good players. It was kind of like, oh, or not many of it. But I do remember that part of it. I remember the one game. And once again, I'm not saying Genesee, but I just remember one of the junior colleges that we played at. We didn't play in New York, a nice field. It wasn't that nice, but I remember. I think it was a game. Was the first game that Andrew Tinish pitched for us. He just came in and threw a couple of innings because they were hitting us pretty hard. And I remember just, we knew that he had a cannon from right field, but when he actually came in and pitched and just saw how hard he could really throw when he let it go, I remember being quite impressed by that. And also now, obviously, with the success he's had in his baseball life, but I just always remember that he's a lefty who threw hard, and I always thought there was if he turns into a pitcher, he has who knows what he could do, because a lefty who threw hard, as you know, it's opportunities arise from that. So I always do remember that. But
It's a pretty rare commodity, right? Like it's and it just, I think that is one thing that was different from our team too. Like McMaster, for example, they had lots of position players who pitched, and we had a separate pitching staff, likely because we had the larger schedule and the need to segregate the two disciplines a little bit. But, that it was an interesting thing because Andrew pitched a bit more in subsequent years, right? So,
I think he even pitched for, what's the semi-pro league in the Quebec City plays in? Or
I think the Northern League, right? Single A or, independent league there. So tell me a little bit about, do you remember who you would, spend more time with, or relationships that developed with? I assume most of your relationships would have been with other pitchers. Maybe, like from what I recall, there was, the kind of the more the bullpen group, like with Todd and Alex and Ted, and I think you were kind of with that group quite a bit. But the Joel was kind of off and doing his own thing, and Ebel also a little bit of his own entity, and then Rob Green and I were pretty tight at the time and still are. Do you remember specific relationships on the pitching staff that you may have had, people you confided in more or sat beside when we were driving stateside, or did you have different friends that developed as a result of the season?
I would say that it's kind of funny as we say that now. I mean, obviously, between yourself and then Ted, we obviously had a friendship, and that for sure I do. I thought Alex and I had a pretty good rapport, and we were both very similar guys, and even Todd to that part of. We knew we were back end kind of guys, and weren't always the first up in the bullpen and doing that kind of part of it during the games and situations like that. So we for sure were at the back of the dugouts, usually at the one far right side, and we're usually the one there. For me personally, I probably ate about 16 pounds of sunflower seeds that year. But so those guys for sure. But I would say that's one of those things that was just always kind of funny for me, that I would say one thing I do regret of that year is that I think I have a lot of friendships to that, and there's a lot of, but I don't think I ever got really close with anybody, just because I kind of separated that. I still had my personal life with, my first year university friends who are still my friends now and doing like that I never, like, I know, for example, like, a lot of baseball guys would go in groups and they would always hang out and they always went out afterwards. And, when I bump into guys at the bars, they were in the baseball group. I was never really part of a baseball group that went out afterwards that much. I was kind of someone who separated myself, and for no real reason. I just went and hung out with my other friends, and just maybe that was part of it, was never having that real close relationship on the team. I guess we had, I find like I'm a guy that I get along with everybody, but at the same time, I don't think it was anybody who would probably come out of that first year saying my best friend was Brad Tupper, unfortunately. But at the same time, it was I would say for sure the back end of the bullpen, and Todd and Alex especially, we spent a lot of time sitting there, waiting for our name to be called and just hanging out. And those guys, don't know much about them, excluding what you've done in the podcast and stuff like that. But at the time, they're both just really nice guys, and I think we all had a pretty good rapport, and hung out in the vans on the drive, and also hung out in the bullpen as well as the dugout during the games. So.
What were your thoughts on Coach Kemp? Did you have much interaction with Darryl? He was working with the hitters a lot, but everyone has a special little Kemp story.
I don't, unfortunately. I would say that for him, I was sure it was that I always felt that I had huge respect for him for his knowledge of the game, for sure. Like, I thought he was he clearly had some good ideas with players and ideas when it comes to hitting, but I would say that there wasn't a lot of interaction between me and him, for sure. So unfortunately, I would say I don't have a story for him. There might have been one, but it's been too long for me to remember. Unfortunately, I don't remember anything that I've forgotten more than I remember now. But yeah, no, I don't have anything for him, unfortunately. Sorry.
Well, no, sometimes it's better to not have an interaction with a coach. At the end of the day, that's usually a good thing. What do you recall of the national championships and going to Montreal on referendum weekend, and what kind of a crazy experience that was?
Yeah, I would say I remember a lot. And then I always say to this day, I was even saying, I think I was even at work the other day, just having the conversation going. I remember going to the national championship in '95 during the referendum. Like, just, I remember that. To me, I always felt like we're at a World Cup, because there's people up and down the street, with the fleur-de-lis and, honking the horns, if they're pro or not, for it. So I always remember that. One thing for me was two, I think it was Alex or was someone, I forget who it was, two of us actually, I don't think it was Alex, someone else, two of us had an exam that we were missing for the nationals. So Coach McRae, for us to go, the teacher said we had to do the test in Montreal. So I don't think it was Alex. So Alex and I both, and I'm trying to blank of what the course was now, but we actually had to write a test during one of the off times in the hotel room.
Oh, that sucks.
That sucked. I remember having to, I think it was it one of my electives? I don't know. But either way, I remember on the drive to Montreal from obviously St. Catharines, I was studying in the van. That's one thing I remember for that, for sure. And so for me, it was always, I remember that, and I always remember how cold it was, obviously. I remember, obviously, it started snowing, and I remember when you were actually starting, and you pitched a really good game, but you were getting a little tired at the end, and that was a few weeks prior to that, I was never really called upon, or not even to warm up in the bullpen. And actually, Coach McRae just goes, "Hey, Tupper, go warm up." And I just remember, sitting down through the whole, being in the cold, sitting down throughout that game and that weekend, and then obviously not pitching truly, even going warm up the bullpen, excluding pregame. Before that, I was like, oh, really? So at that time, you ended up finishing it, I think, at the time, and we never actually pulled over I forget if they switched and got someone else in there, but I think did you pitch? Was that a complete game for you, or?
Yeah, it was, which was unusual in such a pitch count. Right.
So I was technically going to be the one coming in if you faltered, but you didn't. So that's what I always remember. That was the one. I was kind of one of those things. I was going, really? I'm actually going to come into this game and I haven't pitched in 2.5 weeks, since the middle of a snowstorm. But no, it wasn't a snowstorm.
We were up, I think 7-1 or 8-1.
Yeah.
Which
no, I agree. But
I think you would have loved pitching it. One thing I do remember is the umpire had this huge strike zone. Like it was a massive
Right.
strike zone. So I remember bouncing curveballs and then calling them strikes. So right then, they only got, I think, 1 or 2 hits. I balked in a run. That's how they scored a run, which is not unusual for me. As you know, I would balk all the time. But I was pretty determined to finish the game because I was pitching because of my brother. And the McGill coach, who's a Montreal Expos legendary scout and player named John Elias, had trash talked me before the game. I couldn't freaking believe it.
I don't remember. Okay. Wow.
And more than that, I was pitching against another left-handed guy named Brian Titherington, I think, or Titherington, who was the top pitcher in Canada the year before. So I just really wanted to beat his ass.
Right.
And, like it was just a lot of emotions, but the snowflakes were flying. And, there was all this conjecture that we were going to move indoors to Olympic Stadium and the rest of it. And the one thing I did know is it's a guy who was heavily involved in the start of the program and very involved in a lot of different aspects of it. The one thing I couldn't go out there and do that day was let anyone down, because if we don't, if I don't perform well, then that looks really bad, from that perspective. And I didn't want to let anyone down. So I had one of the better games of my life there. But it was also not fair. It was super cold out. The umpire had a huge strike zone. And, I threw hard enough that McGill, despite the McGill play, the only problem was that McGill played in the same conference as Laval. And Laval had those 2 hard throwing lefties that had, so they'd seen left-handers that throw hard with some movement on the ball. So it just, I've thrown a few no-hitters in my life and a couple of games that were great. But that one was the first game that I ever dominated with a curveball. And I remember that, which was unusual for me because I had a crappy curveball before Brock, but then all that stuff with the tennis can and all the reps, I owe it to Coach McRae and to Coach Topping that those guys taught me to have, it wasn't a great curveball. It wasn't like Joel's, but it went from being a mediocre one to a good to very good on my best day kind of curveball. And that made all the difference for me because I could just get away with in Canada throwing fastballs, and that wasn't going to be enough against top end competition or the American teams. And I had to learn to be a pitcher at Brock as opposed to a thrower. So I owe it to Mike and to a lot of people, but I would have, it would have been great for you to get in the game. I think it would have been nice for you to get some mound time under that setting.
For sure, but it was all good. I do remember that. One thing I do remember is that you were a type of player to always, to wear it on your sleeve, so to call, and you were clearly in that game, and it was one of those situations. Even now, you see pitchers nowadays. It's like when you came off and sat in the bull, come in the dugout. We were purposely not really talking to you. Just let him be. Let him be on his own, concentrate, and
it's, and I like throwing inside. I do fully admit to love being a bully on the mound. It was fun, and
that was why you're successful, because of that, right?
Yeah,
not enough of it nowadays. Too many pitchers are too scared to go inside, right? So
that's for sure. So we obviously lose a heartbreaking game to Laval.
Right.
I don't think we need to go down that rabbit hole anymore. I've said it that the character of the team is the championship ring of this first year, just surviving it. And then we have a meeting at the end of that season, and a lot of us make the decision to go on to do other things. Brad, what did you choose to do, and what was what were the motivations behind your decision at that point?
I can't say I necessarily made the decision immediately, but for me, which the experience was, to this day, it's something that I always remember and still talk about. But at the same time, I knew where I stood. I knew where I was from a standpoint of quality and dependent, just what the expectations of me were. And so I would say pretty early on in the off season part of it, because I was only finishing my second year, so I technically had 2 more years, that I knew that I was not going to come back, just because the way I looked at it was I pitched 12 innings and loved it. I learned a lot, and to this day, what the minimal quality of pitching that I do have is a large part of it is what I learned that between the off season and the year I played with Brock. And but at the same time, yeah, for me it was, I knew that I was just going to concentrate on school, and which was kind of bogus because I didn't really do that either. But at the same time, I just decided that I just knew I wasn't going to go down that path, just because it was an honest piece for me. Was I spent a lot of time, I threw the ball up, but at the end of the day, when it came down to it, 2 of those out of the 12 innings, 2 of them were, there's 2 games that I pitched 8 of those 12, so I only pitched 4 innings for a large part of the season. So it was just, to me, a huge commitment, knowing that was a chance. I could have the reverse part of it, I guess, to say, hey, I can come back and be a bigger part of the team, but I knew that was probably not going to be the case, so I just said, we'll just leave that as is. And the one funny story I do have, though, is that in my 4th year, I was playing intramurals. I was playing inter soccer with friends, and so at that point was how Brock gymnasiums, you had the small gyms on the right side if you're walking that way, and then the left side was the big gym, also where the basketball and baseball so-called practices were. So the team was practicing, and so while we were waiting, I decided just to go and check out what the guys are doing during their off-season throwing, and I remember as I was standing there, I don't recall who I was speaking with, but I did bump into Coach Lounsbury, and he was walking. He goes, "Oh, Tupper, hey, how you doing?" "I'm doing good." He's like, "Oh, I thought you graduated," which is one of those things. I was 2 years after the fact, but he like anything else, because I didn't try out for the team or do anything afterwards. But at the same time, nobody had any clue that I actually was still there 2 years after the fact. But anyways, it was kind of funny. But
a little bit harder then too, without social media and that kind of stuff, to keep tethers on people, right? So
for sure. And again, the funny thing is, it was even after the fact with Brock, and to this day, is Brock has still been quite, if you look at the last 30 years and you look at the baseball, and there's, I wouldn't necessarily say Hall of Fame, but some of the best players that have played at Brock, a large part of it, there's been a lot of Burlington players who've actually been integral parts of the Brock team over the last 30 years. And so the one thing I've always saw that is, even though I wasn't there was a few players that I knew, even played against a little bit, were playing at Brock and doing well. So I was indirectly paying attention, and it was good to see, obviously, that Burlington was still heavily influencing Brock baseball. Not me, but other people in Burlington.
Well, but you're part of that initial block of, I think it was 7, right? Like, if we think about it, it's Rob Green, Nate Kapusa, Brian Simmons, yourself, Mark Soyan, Joel Garden, and to a certain extent, Ryan Thompson. And to a lesser extent, I think Matt Fletcher may have had maybe a year in Burlington. So 7, really 7 people. And then the other group were the Oshawa guys. And both have contributed mightily over time to Brock's 30 years, right? The Jordan and Brett Prosper were Oshawa guys that ended up at Brock, and it's been a steady flow of Burlington players. So, lots to be proud of, to be part of that group flying the B banner there. And at least your uniforms in Burlington kind of look like the Brock ones. Ours, from Oshawa, where you had yellow, white, and blue, so slightly different color mix. And
exactly.
But we did contribute to the foundation of this program. What's knowing that you're kind of lingering around the halls and heckling people at Brock baseball practice 2 years later, what was your journey coming out of university?
Yeah, well, I would say probably mine was not any different than a lot of people. I think for me it was um, trying to figure things out. It's not a sad story here in the nature, but it's one of those things of like my mother passed away when I was a teenager, and then my dad was in a situation of not able to really help me out much, and I didn't want to live with him at the time. So for me, it was right off the bat having to, okay, you know what? All right, I have to find something, find my place. And so, right off the bat, I was, you know, like probably a lot of people are, just I was out on my own and started. I literally like started odd jobs. I was even in my field probably for the first 6 months. I was just first getting out and just lived with my sister for a little bit, and then I, rented a place with some guys, and then slowly but surely just you know in the finance world there's a lot of different courses you can take, so I just continued with my education to be licensed and etc. And then within a year or two, I Burlington started working at the local AIC mutual funds place that's no longer existing, but and then so-called started my life in the financial services finance world, and basically took off from there. That I'm essentially doing that to this day. Like, not necessarily doing the same thing, obviously, since 1998, 99, but at the same time, for me, it's been that way, that I've been pretty local and with between living a few places within Burlington and Hamilton, but just even
And
obviously in a
do you
few years meeting my wife and starting a life, and there you go. Go
do
ahead, sir.
did you enjoy the numbers are a hard line for a lot of people. They're either good with it or not. Um, did you always see yourself being involved with um, there's a lot of calculation and a lot of projection and a lot of that, and you have to blend that when you're in financial services with having a bit of
Yeah.
a outgoing nature, because you have to still sell clients, correct? Or do you have to do that with your
Well, not
position?
necessarily. I mean, I that's the biggest thing, was always been a different part of my life, is that like I'm not a sales guy, similar to like exact opposite of you, I guess, from that standpoint. I was never very good at first knowing I was kind of I wouldn't say I was kind of shy when it came to that kind of stuff, and so I was what I would say in the back end, and so I first started out just being an analytical guy and being the back end, and um, just start off in the operational kind of piece, and then when I got that expertise with that operational piece, I turned it into relationship management. So now then became more client facing, and not necessarily the cold call sales and trying to bring in clients, but just client retention is to this day is probably what my forte is. And I even tried to for a few years there, I went through, I guess, I won't call it a midlife crisis, but I actually tried to be a financial advisor and do my own business, and unfortunately was not very successful at it. So I came back to what I actually had a couple of my old bosses join forces at another bank, and they approached me to come back, and so or join them, and so I ended up joining them, and so because I was no longer successful as a financial advisor, wasn't making any money, so I did that for 3 years, and during that time was actually um, even thought about actually joining Ted and Kidspired, and actually even talked to him for a little bit there, and was actually thought about possibly joining his business, and kind of was indirectly for a little bit, and um, then everything worked out to get back into the financial services, not do work with Kidspired, but yeah. So I mean, from that standpoint, I'm you don't necessarily have to in financial services world to be client and selling to clients. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background, which was what I'm good at. My forte now, I would say at that point, is just I know how, especially now being almost 50 years old, I've been doing it for such a long time. I know how things work, and I have a lot of expertise on how the industry works. So that's so at the same time as I think I'm a strong relationship manager. So I use that skill to with my clients to make sure that they're taken care of. So
Well, it's very similar to the construct of a pitching staff. Sometimes you need people who are there to throw innings. You have people that are there to go out. And, I've always said one doesn't work without the other, right, Brad? Like the reality is, someone like me who's wired the way that I am, I would be a lousy back end relief type guy because it's not how I'm wired. It's not how I prep myself. It's not how my pitches line up. And I always had to be a starting guy because I liked taking the responsibility of going out and setting the tone and being, and I crave that spotlight. And it's the same with the scenario of being involved in, in sales and managing sales teams in my career is, it's a very outgoing, very non-introspective way of operating. And it comes with its own set of things that you step in, but you can't survive in life if everybody was wired the way that I'm wired. It would be anarchy and chaos, and the world would be a crazy place. We need, just like absolutely. you can't have a baseball team full of my type of personality. It would be so competitive in the pitching space, and everyone would be killing each other that you would fall flat as a team. You need people who have different skill sets that contribute differently to a team, and that is the one thing that I love about Brock. And our experiences at Brock is that everyone had a different role that they filled. And, we wouldn't have been as successful as we were without everyone filling a role, despite, that felt right for their talent level or for their ability to contribute to a team. And we would have never been, if those five, if your 12 innings had to go to someone else, we wouldn't have been through, we wouldn't have finished well above 500, and we wouldn't have gone to the national championships because
I still have my claim to fame of I was an ERA of whatever 12, but I was 1-0 because I got the one win against Mac. So it's 5 for the win. There you go. So
well, and listen, again, hindsight's a wonderful tool. McMaster at the time was a team that that didn't advance out of Ontario. We eliminated them along with U of T, were the two teams that went to nationals. But that McMaster team, within 2 years, wins a national championship and is Brock's hated rival for a decade or 2 decades, because they're a great team. Retrospect, people like Brad Reeson and people like Craig Cooper, these are amazing players, like generational type players in Canadian baseball. So we tended, I think because of the American schedule, to undervalue the talent level of the Canadian teams we were playing. And some of them were great. And so, I think that helps us a little bit. Tell me a bit about, so we know what you're doing professionally, and you kind of have this self-made adventure to get there. But your greatest team and your greatest coaching job is obviously in your private life, getting married, and you've been involved in coaching. Tell me a little bit about those relationships, Brad, and what made you decide to go back to coaching, and how important has finding love and longevity in marriage been to you?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I would say as much as I've been married for 14, but we've actually known each other and been with each other for 24. We basically were together and lived with each other for 10 years before we actually got engaged. So it took me a while to figure it out, I guess. But so from that standpoint, we have a strong relationship from that standpoint, and we have it's been she's been very supportive and very good in that way. And we have Natalie will be turning 13 in May, and the one unfortunate part is that she's never been really much into sports. She's been doing other things, and which has been great. Never really pushed her, but one part of that I coached for about 3 years between just basically was the 2 years within COVID actually, and then just before COVID, and then 1 year after it. And one part was obviously I had a friend who approached me because he had he was coaching his son. So I coached 14U, 15U, and 16U just as they evolved, and so part of it was never able to coach my daughter in anything. I felt, it's something I wanted to try and pass on my knowledge of whatever amount that I had, I guess, to to the younger crowd if I could. And at the same time, it also honestly was something I wanted to give a try and see if I enjoyed it and see if I was actually any good at it. And it was great. I only did 3. It was very difficult at times being a non-parent and doing it, and also trying to, we also had a job and had family life. So unfortunately, it got a little difficult, and that's why I only did it for 3 years and had to stop doing it. And plus, things happened that the one coach I was with decided not to do it anymore either. But I must say, from the coaching standpoint, I really enjoyed it. I was just brought on as the pitching coach, and so able to do like the discussions we're talking with Toppin and stuff like that, just to, just teaching what I learned, and specifically a lot of what I even learned, from the year at Brock, just able to pass on that what I learned to that younger crowd was the younger kids was great, because I think at the end of the day, just to see that, from my standpoint, seeing, we had this one kid that was not really a pitcher, and it was like you're saying, an infielder who could pitch, was a tournament arm kind of idea, but turned one of those guys into a pretty good pitcher. He's not even pitching nowadays, but the fact of just seeing you can work, and they actually end up being pretty good, and actually teaching kids, how to throw a changeup, how to throw a curveball kind of idea was, and seeing them actually able to do it, and doing it well, or pretty well, if you want to say, was, it was one of those situations that was quite fulfilling in that way, that it was great to see. And, also getting good feedback that kids are also enjoying, the time coaching as well. So that was always a nice little piece as well. So I wouldn't even say I would never coach again. That's for sure. The 3 years I had there were 3 different years, 3 different head coaches, but at the same time, I did really enjoy it, and able to just talk baseball and just talk pitching was something I just really enjoyed. So,
well, it's amazing the number of people combined between Mac and Brock. I think I'm up to, I don't know, close to 35, 36 podcasts I've recorded now. And I think I'm the only one that hasn't coached, or been involved in coaching formally. So
I was late. Yeah. It was, like I said, it was started in 2021. So it's all very recent for me. So,
well, it's great to pass on. There'll be tons of pitchers out there who'll be doing the towel drill all across the province.
There you go.
Would have been introduced to it by us.
Similar to that. It's kind of funny. I did, because, well, it's funny because you say that, because the one thing I find that, like anything else, is, is to this day, is a lot of kids, because I was only coaching AA, and 1 year was single A. So a lot of times you have those guys similar to me that were our house league guys, not the AAA guys now, and then we've been playing it, and necessarily had top quality coaching. So a lot of them, I found that, especially 14, 15, you didn't understand the lower half, right? And not understanding and using their legs. And so that tower drill and other drills similar to that are drills to show kids and to understand what extension and what pushing off and what that can do to your mechanics and just the life of your pitch, right? So that's, for me, I love that drill for that reason, and it actually, and to this day, I still think it works. It shows them that it there's a reason for it. So
yeah, none of us wanted to do it with Ron or Todd, because they would take your skin off with.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, honestly, we stayed, and I think it's because Todd, but it's because Todd was big too and threw hard. But I do remember we all did stay away from Ron as much as possible for now. The whipping action was hurtful. Yes, exactly.
It was just like, okay, I'll pick anyone else, but
exactly.
Brad, it's been 30 years. You've had some very limited interactions, I think, with a few of the guys, but Tell me, first off, we're going to need you to throw an inning. You're not going to just warm up this time. You're going to get in the bloody game because we're going to need it. A few of us
Put me
can't
in,
throw
coach. Put me in, exactly.
Yeah, we have a few of us that can't throw anymore. But, have you maintained any relationships from that Brock team? And if not, which is totally natural given that we've all had to go live life, is there anyone you're really looking forward to getting a chance to talk to in about 6.5 months' time?
I would say, like, even someone we're just having with discussion of the guys who were the originals, and so like between Todd and Alex and those guys, just I'd be looking forward to that. I mean, obviously the Burlington guys were the guys I have, between social media and Facebook and all that kind of stuff. You indirectly are, I guess, keeping track of each other to a certain extent. But Rob Green's one guy actually. I know he's done. He's still in this area and he's been very successful what he's doing in his business. And but at the same time, we've never touched base on that way. So we just in general the pitching staff in general, were I think will be really nice to touch base. And obviously Ted used to live in the area here, so he was obviously his daughter and my daughter actually were friends there for a few years. So there's a few years there. Ted and I were obviously in communication, but it was obviously I haven't seen him for a few years. So even touching base with him and yourself will be, I'm looking forward to that for sure. So
yeah, Teddy's still got that sense of humor of his, which is hard to navigate sometimes because he's just so quick. It's just like I can't leave anything open around Ted.
He is absolutely witty, smart, very witty.
Yeah, and it's amazing how life works out. Like it'll come out on I'll eventually do a podcast of my very own. But Ted worked for me at Quebecor, and and he had some interaction with you regarding Kidspired. Like we all are teammates until the end, and we were teammates 30 years ago, but that also means that we don't stop being teammates, and that part is something I can't overstate. As we get to kind of figure out how people are doing 30 years down the road, it's like no time elapses. It brings me back to little memories in the dugout and an appreciation for the fact that we all survived and thrived in back of the same war that we fought, which was just surviving the year, which was super intense. There was no playbook. Nobody said to us, we're going to pile on this many games in this short a time period. And, there's school involved. There's the psychology involved. There's dealing with, we didn't have 2 coaches like they had at Mac. We had 5 of them and 6, if you count Mark. Like it was just a lot. There was a lot going on. And I think that everyone's come out of it, better for the experience, if that makes sense.
No, I think absolutely. I think it's totally right. I don't think anybody, like, even though most people, like you said, out of the first year, excluding a few of the players who moved on, but I think everyone, gained a lot from that. Like even the people who had success, a lot of success, even in baseball, how, it'd be interesting what Hoover thinks about everything, just for the fact of obviously he had lots of, he went to, University of Niagara, had some success, and you have a lot of people who've had success in the business world, and I'd be surprised if that year playing for Brockton helped them for that, right? Just because that year was a year of adjustments and new things thrown at you, and that's what life is, right? So I think we learned a lot and helped us probably in life in general, just prepare for life and to adjust in life, right? So
yeah, I think your nickname will be Tougher. I think Mike McRae was trying to make you tougher, and like I think that's like it's and Mike will take a great deal of satisfaction because I just did his podcast maybe a few days ago, and it was not even a week, and he takes great pride in the smallest of stories, how people have gone on to be resilient in their life, or he took a great deal of satisfaction in that Matt King is working as a teacher that helps other high performing athletes, and Matt was such a workhorse, but a dude that only got 10 at bats, and had a hard time getting playing time with
Right.
Fletch and Nate there, but always had a great attitude. And I think, any adjustments that were made were there for our benefit because he believed in us as a group. And, my point of view on Coach McRae has always been the same, in that he's the best coach I ever played for. He was also very difficult as you adjusted to his style from time to time, because I hadn't seen it before, that exact style. And he exposed to us what we could be if we were great, when most of us were satisfied with being good, if that makes any sense. And there's a great book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. But Mike was the master of saying, you're capable of more than this. And this is what that looks like. You just got to put in the work to get there. And it's also the hardest working team I've ever been a part of. We worked hard and we ran a lot of stairs.
Our legs are huge.
So, listen, thank you so much for today. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you in about 6.5 months' time. Hopefully before that,
let me
Burlington, we should grab a beer, like all good members of a pitching staff.
Thank you, Mike. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for your time tonight.
The smell of grass.